Hello, hello. Kin Lane, API Evangelist here for another one of my API conversations where I just connect with folks who are doing interesting things with APIs and sit down and have a conversation. Nothing too high production. But we've got a guest coming back. So let's find out who we've got here today. Hello, who are you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel Kocot. So I was with you some time ago, so I'm back again.
Welcome. This is what I love about this podcast because my last one, Breaking Changes, was too high production, and you always had to find someone new and someone bigger. And I just want to have conversations with folks. And when I trigger things online on social media, I want to be able to like go talk about these things. And we were talking about um, designation for APIs. You know, popular ones are private or public, or partner or public. And I've, through several projects and several years of iterating, I've come up with this, what is my definition, which is internal, first party, and third party. But like many good analogies, it breaks down and it doesn't always apply perfectly. But I want to get your thoughts on it. Like, what do you see when it comes to these boundaries as far as how we carve up our APIs?
It's actually very difficult because when we work with customers, we normally have they're in the position of thinking about partner APIs or anything like that. So it's naturally from the beginning more talking about internal. But for me, that was still from the beginning very hard to handle because what is internal? Yeah, when we look on the organizational side, is internal a department or a special structure or whatever actually existing there, or is it really a technical thing? So then it's just about, because this is what we mostly talk with customers about. Yeah, we're having stuff internally presented, and then there's going out somewhere with some partners or some consumers we have outside of our organization, and then it's just external. But sometimes when you even think about onboarding people, I think it's quite hard just to say it's an internal API, whatever that means. So it could be internal for the perspective of the department, or is it shifting boundaries there and going towards another department, so on and so on. And that's why we always have these owner discussions.
Yeah.
Because being in Germany, it's always, it's mine, I have to do it. It's not yours, you're not allowed to do this, you have to ask me. So it's very, very hard to really resonate on that, because you're always getting into the discussion of who is the owner of something.
Yeah. Well, my definition was created from having to kind of carve up these boundaries and go, okay, that's internal. But it was really important for me to designate this first party because I saw these APIs that were externally facing outside of the firewall that were being used to power mobile applications, web, and then increasingly AI implementations. And they had a different intent behind them. So I carved that up. But I think the flaw for me is I'm using a technical boundary. I'm saying firewall and DMZ. Are these technical boundaries that you're dealing with, that you're seeing?
Being in bigger organizations, not really, because what we see is still a lot of centralized API management solutions, not really the thing of say, okay, we talk about the federated stuff, that this is actually coming up now to say, okay, we have a specific gateway for a specific purpose, but in the end it's somehow centralized. So you have many platforms, but they are all looking from a centralized perspective, so everybody can push something there. And it's actually not clear on the other side, oh, do I leave a boundary? Do I leave something? Is there a real, as you have it there, a real technical boundary actually there? It's not really clear because it's still a central platform, so everybody can use it inside the company. Maybe it can be seen on a catalog that is a specific department meant by that, or special product family, or whatever we call it actually. But this is what we normally have. When I look at projects we do out there actually, so it's always internal.
What's the motivation for centralizing? Why are people centralizing?
Because it's normally the old stuff still running, And it's easier because I have a central team, I have this central platform still available. So it's actually something we are triggering right now, saying, okay, we take the ideas from team topologies to really move into a different direction, saying, okay, it might be good to have a more productizing idea of having an API, and then really moving that into a different position then, and say, okay, it's an API product, I have a specific platform for that, and really move from that direction. And then it totally fits when you talk about having a first party API and maybe some kind of internal stuff, because in the end, for me, internal is something I don't want to share with people, actually. It's really mine. Maybe it's something when we go really in the older days, what meant older days, so the mid of the 2010s, actually, when this API led connectivity type of thing was the thing to do, actually. So the things MuleSoft brought up, saying, okay, you have this system API, you have this process API, and then there might be some kind of experience level. So in the end, this system APIs, this is really the internal stuff. Nobody should see this actually outside of actually the boundary I produce. This is also what I used in the past to bring up the gateway idea, really saying, okay, it's a facade, it's really a door. So I built up a little Lego house for that, and had a picture about it, saying, okay, it's the door. You have to go through there and go to something else that you might not see, actually. So it's really on that. And so this is the internal thing for me. And now having your idea of the first party API makes it maybe more obvious to people that it's not about just public and internal. There is something in between, which was not really defined in the past. So this is what I see the most there.
So, like, as you were talking, I'm thinking, large enterprise headquarters company, you have a front door, and you have people coming in, you have people, and you can go out and you can take things out that door. But we have a security at that front desk, right? And so it feels like my intent with the first party is, hey, let's create maybe a space that you can, like, a sandbox, a safe space where you can take these resources and use them for company applications and other things, but they're not quite open to partners yet. There's a little bit more control over them, but it gets really scary, and really, from a security, from a privacy, from a compliance, from a regulatory, real fast, when people are just trying to move fast and deliver things to meet applications. And so what's your thoughts on zero trust and the argument for these internal APIs that, hey, they should be, or first party, that they should be higher quality because they could go outside real fast and be part of that?
In the end, what we did in the past with customer projects was really to say, okay, every API has an aspect of public. So really high demand on security. So even to fit it then when zero trust came up, so to really say, okay, it's this zero trust thing. Every API, it doesn't matter if it's internal or public or whatever, has this high amount of security, actually. So to really make clear, we don't really know, because when you just had this public and internal, it was not really clear, will an internal API become public at some level? Yeah, it's the same, because we at Codecentric we did a blog post about a first one, what we call data interface quadrants, to really say, okay, we think about data interfaces. So we have an interface, an API, and it's somehow bringing data to somebody else. You have sometimes the pattern of this backend for frontend type of thing. And a lot of people still think, oh, I have a backend for frontend API. Nobody will see this.
Yeah.
And what we saw in the past was that there was somehow a backend for frontend API available with no real security on it, because somebody said, okay, it's just for this internal type of thing. And what I see really going into to resonate what you brought up with the first party API is maybe that we have more a shift that's still relevant to say, okay, it doesn't matter what type of API you will provide. From the beginning on, it should be secure, not saying, okay, it's backend for frontend, it will be only used by our specific whatever product to use. It's clear it could be used by something else because we don't really know what will happen there. Because just to say, okay, we built this and it will last forever, yeah, nice try, but reality always looks different when somebody is searching for something.
Yeah, one of the earlier sales techniques I had as API evangelist was uh, someone come to me, hey, we want to talk to you about having a public API presence, and I would prepare, do my due diligence on the company. I would find their existing mobile or web applications, and I would turn on Charles Proxy, and I would use that app, play with it, log in, register, do all the things, and I would distill that down to HAR files, and then I would convert those HAR files into Open API, and then I would bring those into the meeting and go, here I see, here's your public APIs, and this is what we're going to talk about, like where, what can we do with this? And they, what? Where'd you get those APIs? Where'd you get those Open APIs and Swaggers? And I'm like, well, they're public. And no, they're not public. This is our resources that we use to power our applications. I'm like, it's using public DNS though, and so they're public APIs. And I think that shadow of web and mobile applications, and now unfortunately the shadow of AI applications,
Yeah,
is only going to make this worse. What do you think?
yeah, I think it's really still the same. So a lot of people don't really understand that there is a need for security, for being more on the point when thinking about APIs, not just to say, yeah, we put them somewhere and we put an API on a marketplace or put it on a portal, and nobody really cares about if this portal can be found from the outside actually to make it visible and some things like that, because this is also something I did in the past, building portals. Yeah, and you really had to make people aware of, please be aware that only the people who should see the portal can see the portal, not make it open to the world. Because you didn't know how to configure the stuff, being an Azure web application or whatever. So it was always fun to find out if this thing will be found outside of the company, actually, that somebody can find then these APIs. So you always, as you did, we did tests. So I made, but there's one story. I made a portal actually for one customer, and it should get online before the winter holidays. So it was the 23rd or something. So we put it online, and the colleague working with me from the customer said, yeah, it's fine, it's working now, it's online. And I said, stop. We have to really prepare if this is not visible to the outside. So if the configuration somebody did for us is really correct. And he was like, oh, it's late. We have to leave it. It's working now. And I said, no. We have a look. Lucky enough, as we were, we didn't find anything, so it was not possible to get it. But if it would be, then somebody over the holidays could really get into the CMR data of the company, actually getting information about orders and anything that was possible to find, actually, because it was open. So it was really clear that there are APIs available, and if somebody has then keys to get into the company itself, not the best part. So it's really, I think it's the most thing to really think about, even if we classify APIs, to really say, okay, it really doesn't matter. It has to be secure all the time. Whatever security means, if it has to be zero trust or should be zero trust, then it should be zero trust. But hopefully it's secured not by just having a basic auth or something like that. But there must be a security method in a company or in an organization that should be used actually overall. to really make sure that nobody gets access where he or she shouldn't be able to.
Do you feel that business leadership has a handle on API access, portal access, as far as security, compliance?
Only when there are directives coming from authorities. So we have this DORA thing right now. We will see the feeder thing in Europe actually coming up. Then people will have an idea of, oh, I'm allowed to share this, okay, but I have to do this and do that. So it's really then that they need these control things. So we are again with Gregor to say, okay, it's about control. So it's really somebody is pushing you to do that. But in the end, if nobody is pushing you, you will do things just to have it working and to hit the project deadline actually in the end. So that's the thing, really hitting the project deadline, because what we heard in the past always from people working in companies, if this not ready, I will be dead. So this is one of the things. So you do just things and don't really care about, because if nobody sets you under control or gives you the control to do so, you just doing the feature set.
Do you feel conflicted trying to convince people, hey, if you do APIs better, you're going to be able to move fast, confidently, but also you're telling people to secure things and slow down and create, it's a tough sell to, I think, people who are moving fast, to try to convince them to be a little more thoughtful.
In the end, we are by one of the interesting topics, governance. So if the organization is setting up a governance setup, that's not a problem, because you just rely on, okay, we have linting there, we do testing there. If the tests and the linting work not properly, your API will not push to somebody else. That's the best thing. So this is something we did with customers in the past, and it always works well. So if somebody came, we don't need this OAuth classification in the Open API spec. There's a pipeline somewhere that is hitting you then and say, okay, you need this.
So who owns that governance? Is that centrally put in that pipeline, or do teams put that in the pipeline?
That's actually a really interesting question. I'm a big fan there also of federation. So really say, okay, everybody can join the party who is doing stuff there and can bring their own perspective. Because sometimes when you work in really big enterprises, there are lots of aspects you don't really care about because you don't know them. So when you look in research and development, there are different rules than looking into procurement or other scenes there. So it's in the end, I think it's really on to get every people's mind there, not to say, okay, we are the centralized center of enablement or excellence or whatever we call it, and we decide what to do. So it's really this federated approach. I think Gartner brought it also up in the past to really care about what is happening and really switch people or bring people into the position to really care or bring their perspective in.
Well, we're well over time, but I think that's the next conversation we're going to have is around federated versus centralized, because I think this shapes this conversation, and I think we could go on to how domain-driven design shapes this conversation, how the governance and policies shape this, and so. But I appreciate you coming by and talking about this kind of access control and how. I mean, there's another like role-based access control we could go in. But I appreciate you coming by, Daniel, and talking about this with me.
Yeah, thanks again for the possibility to join your conversations. Thanks so much.
I love it. All right, good stuff. I could talk for hours, and that was the problem with the previous podcast, is we would go on for 45 minutes or an hour, and some folks were like, "Oh, that's a little long." So this is why Daniel comes back every once in a while, and we just keep the conversation going, because we've got to talk about gateways. We've got to talk about federated centralization. We got to talk about role-based access control. There's a lot more on the table, but appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. We'll see y'all next time.